All right, let's jump right in, folks. We're diving deep into Bayern Munich's Champions League clash with Celtic FC at Celtic Park.
Definitely a match with some high stakes.
Yeah, first leg of the knockout round. And Bayern, as always, expected to kind of, dominate.
Yeah.
But Celtic at home, with that crowd behind them, I mean, anything could happen, right?
Absolutely. And it's really interesting to see how Bayern's new manager, Vincent Kompany, is approaching these matches.
Okay, yeah, I'm intrigued. So what does approaching look like for Kompany? What's his style?
Well, everything we've seen points to this emphasis on control.
Control. Okay, so how does that translate tactically?
So it's all about dictating the pace, maintaining possession. And this is where it gets interesting, limiting shots for both sides.
Whoa, hold on. Limiting shots for Bayern. That sounds kind of counterintuitive for a team that's known for their attack.
Right. It's a definite shift from their traditional style.
So are they playing more defensively now?
Not necessarily defensively, but definitely more strategically. It's almost like a chess match.
I see. So instead of this all-out attack, they're waiting for the opponent to make a mistake.
Exactly.
No, right.
Or capitalizing on a moment of brilliance from their own players.
Okay, so more calculated, more patient.
Yeah, you could say that.
And this reminds me of another team that's had a lot of success in the Champions League, Real Madrid.
Ah, good point. There are definitely some parallels there.
Yeah, I mean, both teams prioritize controlling the game, possession-based football.
Right.
But Real Madrid, at least under Ancelotti, they seem to have a bit more individual flair in attack. Players like Benzema, Modric.
Yeah, players who could just conjure something out of nothing.
Exactly. So how does that compare to what Kompany is trying to build at Bayern?
Well, you're right about that individual flair. Real Madrid, they had that in spades, but Bayern, under Kompany, they seem more system-reliant.
So less about individual brilliance and more about the collective.
Exactly.
So how did that actually play out against Celtic? Did this calculated approach, did it work?
Well, they did win 2-1, but the match was a lot closer than that scoreline suggests.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Celtic came out with a bold strategy of their own.
So they didn't just park the bus, sit back, and hope for the best?
No, not at all.
I'm impressed. So tell me, what did they do?
They pressed high, and they really targeted Bayern's left flank.
Okay, interesting. Why the left side?
Well, it seems like they identified Bayern's left back, Rafael Guerreiro, as a potential weak point.
Ah, trying to exploit that.
Exactly. So they focused their attacks down that side, trying to overload him, create chances.
Makes sense.
And that meant Dayot Upamecano really had to step up for Bayern.
So Upamecano was crucial in this match.
Oh, absolutely.
It sounds like it.
And it's worth noting that his performance seemed to vary depending on who his center back partner was.
Oh, interesting. How so?
When he was paired with Eric Dyer, he looked calm, composed. But with Kim Min-jae, there was a noticeable difference.
Really?
Yeah, he seemed more frantic, almost as if they weren't on the same wavelength.
That is interesting.
It really makes you think about the importance of those defensive partnerships.
Yeah, absolutely. That chemistry, that understanding between players.
For sure.
But let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
Because there was another key player for Bayern who had a surprisingly quiet game.
Let me guess. Musiala.
Yeah, Musiala. I mean, he's supposed to be their star player, but he wasn't really involved.
Yeah, and our sources suggest that the tactical setup might be a reason for that.
In what way?
Well, it seemed like Bayern's wingers weren't playing at Musiala's pace, especially on runs behind the defense.
So he wasn't getting the service he needed.
Exactly. His ability to create chances was limited.
Okay, so it sounds like the system itself might actually be hindering Musiala.
Potentially.
Is this something that Kompany needs to address if Bayern want to, actually go all the way in the Champions League?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't have a player of Musiala's talent being underutilized.
No, absolutely.
It'll be interesting to see how this develops if Bayern look to bring in players who complement Musiala's strengths.
Right. Yeah, because he needs that space to operate.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the key moments in the match, like that disallowed goal for Celtic in the first minute.
Oh, talk about a heart-stopping moment for both sets of fans.
Right.
It could easily swung the momentum in Celtic's favor.
Yeah, if that goal had stood.
Absolutely.
And Bayern also had their share of missed opportunities, right? Like Kane's missed header and that close call with a potential penalty on Upamecano.
Yeah, some real nail-biters.
And then, of course, you have Olise's stunning goal for Bayern.
What a strike.
Yeah, followed by Kane's acrobatic volley to secure the win.
It seemed like Bayern had finally found their rhythm.
But Celtic, they kept fighting. They managed a late consolation goal.
And that goal was crucial. It kept the tie alive.
Right, because it meant Bayern only had a 1-goal advantage heading into the second leg.
Yep.
Okay, before we move on to that second leg, I want to talk about the atmosphere at Celtic Park.
Oh, yeah.
Because our sources mentioned how even the commentators were caught up in the energy of the crowd.
It's legendary, that Celtic support.
Yeah, it's electric.
That kind of atmosphere can definitely influence a match, especially in a high-stakes knockout game like this.
Absolutely.
It gives the home team a real edge.
Okay, so Bayern, they escaped with a 2-1 win.
But it was much closer than many anticipated.
So did anything about their performance in this first leg raise any, I don't know, red flags for you?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, yes, there are a couple of things that stood out to me.
Okay, what are they?
First, their attack just seemed a bit too reliant on individual moments of brilliance.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Rather than consistent, flowing build-up play.
Mm-hmm.
And second, that vulnerability on the left side of their defense, I think stronger teams could really exploit that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they can address those issues before they face tougher opponents.
Right, because this was just the first hurdle.
Exactly. The real challenges are yet to come.
I can't wait to see how it all unfolds.
Me neither.
This is going to be an exciting journey for Bayern and for us as we follow their progress.
For sure.
Okay, so we've talked about the tactics. We've analyzed the key moments of this first leg.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still a lot more to unpack, especially with that second leg coming up.
Right. We've only just scratched the surface.
So join us next time as we dive into the second leg and see if Bayern were able to address those concerns.
It's going to be fascinating.
Absolutely. Until then, keep those tactical brains engaged and enjoy the beautiful game.
Cheers to that.
So Bayern, back in Munich for the second leg, 1-goal lead, but not exactly comfortable.
Yeah, definitely set the stage for a pretty interesting second leg.
Okay, so how did they approach that match back on home turf? Did Kompany stick with his approach from the first leg, or did he feel the need to be a little bit more assertive, I guess, at the Lands Arena?
Well, it's safe to say I think that he doubled down on his philosophy.
So still all about control.
Oh, yeah. Bayern came out controlling possession, limited Celtic's opportunities, really dictated the tempo.
It sounds like they were determined to just suffocate Celtic's attack before it could even get started.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
But what about Musiala? Was he able to find more space in this match?
It's interesting. He was more involved in the build-up.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say he was the dominant force that we've come to expect, though.
Really?
It almost seems like he's still struggling to fully adapt to this more controlled system.
So even in a convincing win, 3-0, that's a pretty convincing win.
Right.
You're saying that those underlying tactical issues that we talked about earlier were still present.
Exactly.
That's fascinating to me.
And that's what makes the second leg so interesting.
Yeah.
They secured a comfortable win, 5-1 on aggregate, but it still leaves these questions about whether this approach can actually bring them that ultimate success in the Champions League.
Because as impressive as that win was, Celtic aren't exactly on the same level as some of the other teams that Bayern could potentially face later in the tournament.
Right, exactly.
Like Real Madrid, Manchester City, PSG, those kinds of teams.
Yeah, those are the real tests.
Yeah, so it's almost like we've seen the prologue and now the real story is about to begin.
I like that analogy.
What do you think? What should we be looking for as Bayern progress? What aspects of their game do you think they need to refine if they want to go all the way?
Well, I think for one, it'd be really interesting to see if Kompany can find a way to better integrate Musiala.
Yeah.
Bring his unique talents into the system.
Because right now it seems like the system is actually holding him back.
Potentially, yeah.
So maybe some personnel changes are needed. Bring in players who complement Musiala's style a bit better.
Possibly.
What do you think?
But I think there's also this question of whether this more pragmatic, controlled approach, can it actually hold up against teams that are equally adept at dictating the tempo?
Right. Teams that can control the game themselves.
Exactly. Can Bayern find a way to unlock defenses that sit deep and refuse to give them space?
So, it's almost like a philosophical debate, right?
Yeah.
Is it better to be switching between different styles depending on the opponent? Or is it more effective to have this clearly defined system that you impose on every match?
And that's what makes Kompany's Bayern so intriguing to me.
Yeah.
We're still in the early stages. It's unclear how this team will evolve.
Will they become more fluid in attack?
Yeah.
Or will they double down on this control?
Exactly.
It's exciting to think about the possibilities. But regardless of how they line up,
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to face some formidable challenges in the later rounds.
Oh, without a doubt.
So we've analyzed the tactics. We've followed Bayern's progress through these first two legs.
Mm-hmm.
But as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious, what's your biggest takeaway from these matches against Celtic? What stood out to you the most?
What's fascinating to me is this contrast between their dominant results and the lingering questions about their long-term potential.
I see what you mean.
The scorelines suggest a team that's in complete control, but when you look closer, there are these potential weaknesses that could be exploited against tougher opponents.
Almost like they're winning in spite of the system rather than because of it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And it really sets up a fascinating narrative for the rest of their Champions League campaign, right?
Absolutely.
Can they continue to rely on those individual moments of brilliance, defensive solidity? Or will they need to evolve tactically to really conquer Europe?
I guess we'll have to wait and see.
We will.
It's going to be an exciting ride, that's for sure.
I can't wait. Okay, so we've spent all this time breaking down Bayern's performances, analyzing their new system under Kompany, and I think it's time to ask the big question. Are they actually contenders?
Yeah, I mean, they looked good against Celtic, but like we've been saying, that's just one hurdle.
Right. Those high-pressure knockout matches against the real European giants, that's where we'll see what they're really made of.
I mean, can they replicate what they did against Celtic against teams like, I don't know, Real Madrid, Manchester City, PSG?
Yeah. So are they contenders or pretenders? What's your verdict?
I honestly think it's too early to say for sure.
Okay.
I mean, we've seen like flashes of brilliance, especially defensively.
Yeah, their defense has been solid.
Right, but then there are these moments where they look a bit disjointed, particularly in attack.
Yeah, and it always seemed to come back to Musiala. He's such a unique talent.
Yeah, he is.
But it just feels like he's not quite clicking in this system.
Yeah, and that's a concern, right? I mean, you can't have a player of his caliber operating at anything less than 100% in this competition.
No, not if you want to win the whole thing.
Exactly.
So what needs to happen? What do they need to do to take that next step?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think there are a few possibilities.
Okay, like what?
Well, Kompany could, tweak his system a little bit.
Give Musiala more freedom?
Yeah, more freedom. They could bring in some new players who complement his style better.
Right. Create a system that actually plays to his strengths.
Or they could just double down on this control-oriented approach.
And hope that it's enough.
It's
like they're still figuring things out,
Yeah, it's a team in transition.
Which is honestly what makes them so interesting to watch.
I agree. There's a real sense of suspense. Will they succeed? Will they fall apart?
I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
And that's the beauty of the Champions League.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen.
Anything is possible.
Absolutely.
Bayern Munich under Kompany, it's a new chapter.
It is. And it's going to be fascinating to see how it unfolds.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, folks, that's our deep dive into Bayern Munich and their Champions League journey.
It's been a pleasure.
As always, thanks for listening.
Cheers.
We'll be back soon with more insights, more analysis, and of course, more passionate football talk.
Looking forward to it.
Until then, keep those tactical brains engaged and enjoy the beautiful game.